Hi, I'm Miss White, and I'll be doing the reading passage with you this week. First, because it's a little bit difficult to read, I am going to read this passage aloud to you, and hopefully that will be more helpful in understanding the questions. So the top part doesn't give you a title or an author, but it merely tells you that this is prose fiction, meaning it is a made-up story, but it's in paragraphs. And it says this passage is an excerpt from a short story written by a British author early in the 20th century. So 20th century means 1900s, and you have to understand that back then Britain was a world power and they owned lots of places, and in fact India was a big colony for them at that time. So here's the passage. Everyone in the village knew that Helen Tyrrell did her duty by all her world, and by none more honorably than by her only brother's unfortunate child. The village knew, too, that George Tyrrell had tried his family severely since early youth, and were not surprised to be told that, after many fresh starts given and thrown away, he, an inspector of Indian police, had entangled himself with the daughter of a retired non-commissioned officer, and had died of a fall from a horse a few weeks before his child was born. Mercifully, George's father and mother were both dead, and though Helen, 35 and independent, might well have washed her hands of the whole disgraceful affair, she most nobly took charge, though she was, at the time, under threat of lung trouble which had driven her to the south of France. She arranged for the passage of the child and a nurse from Bombay, met them at Marseilles, nursed the baby through an attack of infantile dysentery due to the carelessness of the nurse, whom she had to dismiss, and at last, thin and worn but triumphant, brought the boy late in autumn, wholly restored, to her Hampshire home. All these details were public property, for Helen was as open as the day, and held that scandals are only increased by hushing them up. She admitted that George had always been rather a black sheep, but things might have been much worse if the mother had insisted on her right to keep the boy. Luckily, it seemed that people of that class would do almost anything for money, and as George had always turned to her in his scrapes, she felt herself justified, her friends agreed with her, in cutting the whole non-commissioned office connection, and giving the child every advantage. A christening, by the rector, under the name Michael, was the first step. So far as she knew herself, she was not, she said, a child lover, but for all his faults, she had been very fond of George, and she pointed out that little Michael had his father's mouth to a line, which made something to build upon. As a matter of fact, it was the Tyrrell forehead, broad, low, and well-shaped, with the widely spaced eyes beneath it, that Michael had most faithfully reproduced. His mouth was somewhat better cut than the family type, but Helen, who would concede nothing good to his mother's side, vowed he was a Tyrrell all over, and there being no one to contradict, the likeness was established. In a few years Michael took his place, as accepted as Helen had always been, fearless, philosophical, and fairly good-looking. At 6, he wished to know why he could not call her Mummy, as other boys called their mothers. She explained that she was only his auntie, and the aunties were not quite the same as mummies, but that, if it gave him pleasure, he might call her Mummy at bedtime, for a pet name between themselves. Michael kept his secret most loyally, but Helen, as usual, explained the fact to her friends, which, when Michael heard, he raged, "Why did you tell? Why did you tell?" came at the end of the storm. "Because it's always best to tell the truth," Helen answered, her arm round him as he shook in his cot. "All right, but when the truth's ugly, I don't think it's nice." "Don't you, dear?" "No, I don't, and—" She felt the small body stiffen. "Now you've told, I won't call you Mummy any more, not even at bedtimes." "But isn't that rather unkind?" said Helen softly. "I don't care. You've hurted me in my insides, and I'll hurt you back. I'll hurt you as long as you live." Don't talk like that, dear. You don't know what—" "I will, and when I'm dead, I'll hurt you worse." "Thank goodness, I shall be dead long before you, darling." "Huh! Emma says, 'Never know your luck.'" Michael had been talking to Helen's elderly, flat-faced maid. "Lots of little boys die quite soon. So'll I. Then you'll see." Helen caught her breath and moved towards the door, but the wail of "Mummy, Mummy!" drew her back again, and the two wept together. So you have to understand the cultural norms or cultural situation at this time. So apparently Helen's brother George had been working in India. He gets involved and has a child out of wedlock with the daughter of a non-commissioned officer. So someone who just, was like a normal enlisted military person, but did get a good rank, but still someone who didn't come from a background of, a really wealthy family or anything like that. So that would have been very disgraceful in that time period to have a child out of wedlock. And it'll point to that at that last question that you're looking at. So the aunt takes in the little boy. So the first question asks the main purpose of the first paragraph. And anytime you see these ACT questions pointing to a specific line or a specific paragraph, you need to go back and reread that paragraph. So if you look at that first paragraph, that's talking about the family situation, how this came to be, and the fact that the aunt, even though she was a little bit sick herself, took this child in because there was no other family on his dad's side. So that first paragraph is meant to show you that she's a good person. She's going to take responsibility. She's going to care for this child who might not have a good living situation otherwise. So the answer you want to choose there is A. The main purpose is to portray Helen as a righteous and responsible person. It doesn't idealize her, so you can mark out B. It doesn't contrast her virtues really with her brothers necessarily. It doesn't go into all the beliefs and values of the family, like how they would have based their religious or moral decisions. But so A is the choice you want to make there. Number 2 says, which of the following statements best describes the function in the passage of the statement that Helen felt justified in cutting the whole non-commissioned office connection and giving the child every advantage? And again, it points you to those specific lines so you can read in context there too. So the answer there is also A. It reinforces the narrator's point that Helen believes in the superiority of the social class to which she belongs. So the fact that her brother was an inspector and had a high rank, that sort of leads you to believe that they're from a wealthy family. Also, the fact that she could leave Britain and go to France to apparently go to some resort type thing and get her own health in better condition meant that she had money. So there's a little hint there. It helps you kind of understand, she cuts off the mom's family and says that she's going to basically give the kid the advantage of her family money. So that's kind of snooty in her saying that her social class is better than the social class of the mom of this child. So that goes with A. Number 3, the passage indicates that both Helen and Michael are most concerned about, and you want to choose C there, other people's opinions of them. Helen's just going to be very out in the open about everything, but the little kid, Michael, kind of wants to keep secrets, and then, when other people kind of know that she's not really his mom, that might be really embarrassing for him as a little kid. So C is your answer there. In number 4, it says, in the last paragraph of the passage, lines 92 through 95, the author portrays 2 characters who, and again, go back and reread that passage. That's the part where it kind of catches Helen off guard that a little 6-year-old would be thinking about his own mortality, and so she starts to get upset and go out of the room, but he doesn't want to leave her, and he wants his mom figure, so he cries out for her. So that passage goes with answer J the best. Sometimes they have quarrels but desperately need each other's love. So they're the only 2 people that they have in this world, so they take care of each other and love each other. Number 5, your last question says, as it is used in line 12, the word mercifully most clearly implies that, and again, go back to line 12, it's talking about, that George Terrell had gotten a woman pregnant even though he was not married to her. So the line says, mercifully, George's father and mother were both dead. So that kind of means that they wouldn't be embarrassed hearing about what their son has done here. So the answer to this question is G. Helen is relieved that her parents have been spared the shame of a family scandal. So again, your answers there should be number 1, A, number 2, A, number 3, C, number 4, J, and number 5, G.